Imagine a condemned prisoner's final request is not a steak or comfort food, but a lump of soil scooped from the earth. In one of the strangest episodes in death row history, a Texas murderer named James Edward Smith asked for a lump of Riacunda dirt as his last meal, a type of soil used in voodoo rituals that he believed would aid his reincarnation. Prison officials were flabbergasted. Since dirt wasn't on the approved foods list, the request was denied, and Smith had to settle for a cup of yogurt instead. Such bizarre final requests are not urban legends, but real choices made by prisoners in their final hours. From dirt and single olives to feasts fit for a king, left entirely uneaten, these unheard-of last meals reveal chilling and fascinating truths. Each request, no matter how shocking, lavish, or poignant, was a prisoner's last grasp at autonomy, a final statement made on the eve of execution. Stay tuned as we delve into the most rare and unbelievable last meal requests that death row has ever seen, uncovering the stories and motives behind them. Not all unusual final meals are grotesque or gluttonous. One was elegantly symbolic. Victor Feger, a 28-year-old condemned in 1963, chose a single olive with a pit left in as his last meal. He reportedly hoped that the olive pit might be buried with him and sprout into an olive tree, a final symbol of peace from a man headed to a violent end. When Feger was executed by hanging in Iowa, prison officials later found the olive pit tucked inside his suit pocket, as if he wanted to carry that hope to the grave. This simple, peaceful request stands in haunting contrast to his crime, murder, and the punishment he faced. In the gallery of notorious last meals, Feger's lone olive remains an outlier, a quiet message of life and peace blooming out of death. Some prisoners went to the opposite extreme, ordering enormous banquets as their last suppers. One of the most gluttonous was Gary Carl Simmons, Jr., a Mississippi inmate executed in 2012. Simmons compiled a jaw-dropping menu totaling 29,000 calories. It included large deep-dish pizzas, a bucket of fried chicken, burgers, fries, a family-size bag of Doritos, 2 milkshakes, a tub of ice cream, and more. This button-bursting feast was so large it could have fed multiple people. Unsurprisingly, Simmons couldn't finish it all. In Texas, in the same year, Stephen Michael Woods, Jr. decided to indulge every craving before his execution. He requested an epic spread: 1 kilogram of bacon, a large pizza, fried chicken, 2 burgers with bacon, a dozen garlic breadsticks with marinara, fries, assorted sodas, Mountain Dew, Pepsi, root beer, sweet tea, plus ice cream. It was a meal as excessive as his crimes, and it pushed the limits of Texas's hospitality. But an even more infamous feast would soon change Texas policy forever. Just a week after Woods's meal, Lawrence Russell Brewer, a convicted murderer involved in a notorious hate crime, made headlines with a Texas-sized final meal request. Brewer ordered a 12-item banquet: 2 chicken fried steaks with gravy and onions, a triple meat bacon cheeseburger, a cheese omelet with fixings, a large bowl of fried okra with ketchup, a pound of barbecued meat with half a loaf of bread, 3 fajitas, a meat lover's pizza, a pint of ice cream, a slab of peanut butter fudge, and 3 root beers. Astonishingly, the prison chefs cooked all for him. But when the heaping trays arrived, Brewer simply refused to eat a single bite, stating he wasn't hungry. This final act of defiance, wasting a meal that large, enraged Texas officials. The very next day, Texas abolished special last meal requests for condemned inmates, ending a century-old tradition. From then on, Texas prisoners would get standard prison fare only, thanks to Brewer's uneaten banquet. Never again would a Texas inmate dine on a personalized feast before execution. For sheer audacity and dark humor, it's hard to top the case of Thomas J. Grasso. Executed in 1995 in Oklahoma, Grasso went out with both a full stomach and a final gripe for the history books. His last meal request was extravagant: 24 steamed mussels, 24 steamed clams, a Burger King double cheeseburger, 6 barbecue spare ribs, 2 strawberry milkshakes, half a pumpkin pie with whipped cream and strawberries, and most importantly, a can of SpaghettiOs with meatballs at room temperature. The prison staff did their best to satisfy the massive order and delivered everything, except they substituted regular spaghetti for the branded SpaghettiOs. On the gurney, strapped in and awaiting lethal injection, Grasso used his final breaths to issue a petulant public statement. "I did not get my SpaghettiOs. I got spaghetti. I want the press to know this." Those absurd last words became infamous, ensuring that Grasso's name is remembered not for his brutal crimes, but for complaining about canned pasta at the very end. It's a macabre reminder that even a convicted killer can cling to the pettiest of concerns when facing death. Not every final meal story is selfish or bizarre. One was a plea for kindness that prison rules couldn't accommodate. Philip Workman was a Tennessee inmate executed in 2007 for killing a police officer during a robbery. On the eve of his execution, Workman made an unusual request. He asked the prison to donate his final meal, a large vegetarian pizza, to a local homeless person instead of serving him. It was a gesture of atonement, perhaps seeking to create a morsel of good out of his wrongdoing. The prison refused to grant this request, since it wasn't a meal for the inmate himself. In quiet protest, Workman declined to eat anything at all before his execution. However, his wish did not die in vain. When the public learned of Workman's request, people around Tennessee fulfilled it on their own. Many sent pizzas to homeless shelters in Nashville to honor his last wish. Dozens of homeless individuals enjoyed hot pizza because of Workman's story. This poignant episode shows a different side to the last meal tradition. In Workman's case, it became a final opportunity to show remorse and compassion, even if the system itself wouldn't bend to accommodate it. While some inmates gorged on banquets, others made endearingly simple requests. Velma Barfield, a 52-year-old grandmother from North Carolina, was dubbed the Death Row Granny, convicted of poisoning her fiancé in 1978. In 1984, she became the first woman executed in the U.S. after capital punishment was reinstated. Barfield's last meal wasn't a heavy Southern dinner or fancy dessert, but a bag of cheese doodles and a can of Coca-Cola. That's it, just a salty snack and a soda from a vending machine. Perhaps it was a taste of normalcy from her everyday life. The image of an elderly, bespectacled woman calmly munching on cheese puffs before lethal injection is jarring and sad. It reminds us that behind the sensational crimes, these prisoners were also human beings with personal comfort foods. In Barfield's case, her unheard final meal was as humble as her persona, a grandmother's junk food treat to ease the journey to the grave. A number of condemned inmates have spent their last moments indulging an unapologetic sweet tooth. Instead of steak or burgers, they craved candy and desserts, perhaps seeking a final sugar high as a strange comfort before death. In 2011, Gerald Lee Mitchell, executed in Texas, skipped a formal meal entirely and simply requested a bag of assorted Jolly Rancher candies as his last indulgence. He slowly savored the fruity sweets in his cell, one by one, until none were left. A teenager's treat turned final right. Even more extreme was Dobie Gillis Williams, executed in 1999 in Louisiana. Williams went for an all-out last dessert menu: 12 candy bars, assorted chocolate bars including Hershey's, Baby Ruth's, and Snickers, a pint of chocolate ice cream, a coconut pie, a lemon pie, and a chilled Coca-Cola. Witnesses say Williams actually managed to eat all dozen candy bars and the ice cream, though he was too full to touch the pies at the end. One could imagine the 38-year-old murderer sitting on death watch with a chocolate-smeared grin, having gorged on sweets like a kid in a candy store. This sugar-loaded request while shocking to our sensibilities, was Williams's way of leaving the world on a literally sweet note. In the end, whether it's hard candy or a mountain of chocolate, these dessert-themed last meals stand out as some of the most unorthodox final requests ever recorded on death row. Even the most infamous criminals sometimes make surprisingly simple, yet strangely telling, last meal choices. Timothy McVeigh, the domestic terrorist behind the 1995 Oklahoma City bombing that killed 168 people, had the opportunity to request anything for his final meal in 2001 under federal execution protocols. Many speculated on what the unrepentant mass murderer might choose. Would it be a lavish spread or something outrageous? McVeigh shocked everyone by asking for just 2 pints of mint chocolate chip ice cream. Nothing else. The man responsible for so much death spent his last night alive sitting in a windowless cell, slowly eating ice cream in silence. Some have noted the chilling symbolism. The coldness of that mint chip ice cream mirrored McVeigh's own cold-blooded nature. Others saw in his simple request a final act of control, a refusal to partake in any hearty Last Supper ritual. In any case, the stark image of McVeigh's final meal, a quiet dessert for a remorseless killer, remains etched in history. It's a reminder that sometimes the most notorious individuals meet their end not with drama, but with eerily mundane choices. One condemned man managed to turn his last meal into a final night of entertainment. Ronnie Lee Gardner had spent 25 years on Utah's death row for 2 murders, and in 2010 he was set to be executed by firing squad. A rare method even then. For his last meal, Gardner requested the sort of evening many free men might envy, a sumptuous surf and turf dinner with a movie marathon. He was served steak and lobster tail with apple pie and vanilla ice cream for dessert, plus a 7-Up soda. The Utah prison officials granted Gardner permission to watch the entire Lord of the Rings film trilogy while eating his meal, a final indulgence of fantasy and freedom. Over 11 hours, he enjoyed an epic cinematic journey about good and evil, even as his own fate was sealed. Gardner actually began fasting 48 hours before the execution, drinking only liquids, so that he could fully enjoy the meal without a cramped stomach. This unique request turned his last hours into a strange mix of home comfort and Hollywood escapism. As the last credits rolled and dawn approached, Gardner was led to the execution chamber. He faced the firing squad with the taste of steak and lobster still fresh and the echoes of the return of the king in his mind. It was an extraordinary finale granted to a man about to die, a reminder that even on death row, moments of humanity and mercy can flicker through the darkness. From the oddly poetic to the outrageously gluttonous, these rare last meal requests are more than morbid curiosities. They are windows into the minds of condemned criminals in their final moments. Whether a prisoner sought to make a statement of peace, like Feger's Olive, or act out in defiance, like Brewer's Untouched Feast, each choice carried meaning. Some requests were acts of personal comfort or nostalgia, a bag of candy, a favorite snack, while others were the prisoner's way of exerting one last sliver of control in a situation where they had none. Psychologists note that facing imminent death can suppress appetite entirely. Ted Bundy, for instance, declined a special last meal, but it can also drive odd cravings or symbolic acts. Society, too, has long been fascinated by the tradition of final meals. Dating back to ancient times, the last meal has been seen as a ritual of compassion, a chance to allow the condemned a final pleasure or a way to make peace with their fate. Love it or loathe it, the practice of granting a last meal offers a humanizing glimpse at people we often label only as monsters. As one writer observed, it's a fascinating glimpse into the minds of notorious criminals. In those final choices, be it dirt candy or a 7-course feast, we see flickers of personality, remorse, humor, or anger. In the end, the prisoners no longer had any control over life or death, but they could control their final menu, their last statement to the world made not in words, but in food. And for that reason, however bizarre or extravagant the request, the justice system often honored it as a small mercy. These unheard-of final meals and rare requests continue to captivate us, ensuring that the stories of the condemned live on far beyond their last bite.